racist cop attacks black woman in court without knowing she's his new police chief. The courtroom clash. Officer Daniel Reynolds stood tall in the witness box, hands folded in front of him. He had been a cop for 15 years, and in all that time, he had never liked being questioned, especially not by civilians. Today was no different. Across the courtroom, a black woman in a sharp navy blue suit sat among the observers. She watched him intently, her expression unreadable. He didn't recognize her, but something about her presence irritated him. When the defense attorney pressed him on a recent traffic stop that had escalated into an arrest, the woman leaned forward slightly, listening. Then she spoke. Officer Reynolds, do you believe your approach in this case was justified? Her voice was calm, controlled, but there was an edge to it. Reynolds scoffed. And who exactly are you? He shot back, his tone laced with condescension. The judge raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. The woman didn't flinch. Just someone interested in how officers like you enforce the law. Reynolds felt his temper rise. Listen, lady, if you don't know how police work is done, maybe you should stay out of it. A murmur spread through the courtroom. The woman simply nodded, as if she had expected this response. The assault. After the session ended, Reynolds stormed out of the courtroom. His mood was foul. That woman had no business questioning him, especially not in front of a judge. Then he saw her. She was speaking with two other people near the hallway exit. Still calm, still composed. Something in him snapped. He marched toward her, grabbing her arm. You think you can just walk in here and disrespect an officer? He growled. She pulled back, eyes narrowing. Let go of me. But Reynolds shoved her against the wall, back-pinning her arm. You need to learn some damn respect, gasps echoed in the hallway. Several lawyers and officers turned in shock. Someone yelled, "What the hell are you doing, Reynolds?" Before he could process what was happening, a commanding voice cut through the chaos. Officer Reynolds, stand down. A senior officer, Captain Harris, rushed toward them, face pale. Reynolds let go, but he was still fuming. This woman was causing trouble in the courtroom. Captain Harris turned to the woman. Chief Carter, are you all right? The room went dead silent. The shocking truth. Reynolds blinked. Chief who? The woman straightened her blazer, staring him down. Officer Daniel Reynolds stood in the witness box, his posture rigid, eyes scanning the room. He was here to testify about a routine traffic stop that had turned into an arrest, but something about the way this courtroom felt made him uneasy. Then he noticed her. A black woman in a sharp navy blue suit sat in the front row, arms crossed, our woman watching him with quiet intensity. He didn't recognize her, but the way she held herself, calm, confident, rubbed him the wrong way. When the defense attorney questioned his reasoning for the arrest, the woman leaned forward slightly. Then she spoke. Officer Reynolds, do you believe your approach in this case was justified? Her voice was even, controlled. Reynolds scoffed, shaking his head. And who exactly are you? He said, a smirk tugging at his lips. The woman didn't flinch. Just someone interested in how officers like you enforce the law. The judge shot Reynolds a warning look. You'll answer the question, officer. Reynolds let out a breath, his irritation bubbling beneath the surface. I did my job. The suspect was acting suspiciously. I followed procedure, and when they got aggressive, I handled the situation. The woman tilted her head. You handled the situation? According to your report, the suspect was already in handcuffs when you forced them to the ground. Is that standard procedure? A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Reynolds stiffened. His smirk faded. I did what was necessary, he snapped. You weren't there. She raised an eyebrow. No, I wasn't, but I don't need to be there to recognize excessive force. The tension in the room thickened. Reynolds leaned forward slightly. Listen, lady, if you don't know how police work is done, maybe you should stay out of it. The courtroom went silent. The judge's gavel struck once. The woman just smiled, but there was no humor in it, only a quiet authority that made Reynolds feel suddenly small. She said nothing else. But as the case wrapped up, Reynolds couldn't shake the feeling that he had just made a very big mistake. The attack. After the courtroom session, Officer Daniel Reynolds stormed out, his jaw clenched. His mood was foul. That woman, whoever she was, had humiliated him in front of a judge. He spotted her near the exit, speaking with two other people, still looking composed, still acting like she belonged there. Something in him snapped. He marched toward her, his boots heavy on the polished floor. "You think you can just walk in here and disrespect a cop?" he growled. Before she could respond, he grabbed her arm, tightening his grip. A hush fell over the hallway. The woman stiffened but didn't flinch. Instead, she met his glare with an icy calm. "Let go of me." Reynolds didn't. He leaned in instead. "You need to learn some damn respect." Then, chaos. Lawyers and officers nearby turned in shock. Someone yelled, "What the hell are you doing, Reynolds?" Before he could process what was happening, a booming voice cut through the tension. "Officer Reynolds, stand down." A senior officer, Captain Harris, rushed toward them, his face pale. Reynolds released his grip but scoffed. This woman was causing trouble in court. She? Captain Harris didn't even look at him. Instead, he turned to the woman and spoke with the kind of deference Reynolds had never seen him use before. "Chief Carter, are you all right?" Reynolds' stomach dropped. The woman adjusted her blazer, her face unreadable. Then she turned to Reynolds and smirked. James Carter had been a garbage collector for nearly 20 years. He knew every house, every street, and even most of the families in the quiet suburban neighborhood where he worked. The people were polite, some waved, some nodded, but few truly saw him. He didn't mind. It was just part of the job. This morning was no different. The hum of his truck rumbled behind him as he hauled another trash bin to the back, dumping its contents with practiced ease. Just as he was about to move to the next house, a small figure burst out from a nearby front door, running toward him. She was barefoot, blonde hair and messy pigtails. Tears streaked down her flushed cheeks. James barely had time to react before the girl threw herself against his leg, clutching at his uniform. "Please!" she sobbed, her tiny fingers gripping his sleeve. "Help my mommy." James immediately crouched down. "Hey, hey," he said, voice calm but urgent. "What's wrong? Are you hurt?" The little girl shook her head violently. "There's a bad man in my house. Mommy said run, run and find help." James's heart pounded. His eyes flicked toward the house. The front door was ajar. Shadows moved inside. Someone was still in there. A dangerous decision. James glanced around. The street was eerily quiet. No neighbors were outside. No one had noticed the little girl's distress. He wanted to run in, but instinct told him that would be a mistake. Instead, he pulled his phone from his pocket and dialed 911. "This is James Carter," he said quickly. "I'm on Maplewood Drive. A little girl just ran to me, says there's an intruder in her house. Her mom might be in danger." The dispatcher's voice was calm but firm. "Stay where you are. Officers are on their way." James exhaled. "You hear that, sweetheart? The police are coming. You're safe." Emily, he'd learned her name between her shaky breaths, nodded but still clung to him. Then James noticed it. A faint figure behind the curtain of the front window. Watching them, the hairs on his neck stood up. The intruder knew they had called for help. Sirens and suspense. Minutes felt like hours. James kept Emily close, shielding her with his body. He never took his eyes off the house. Then, sirens. Two police cruisers screeched onto the street, blocking both ends. Officers poured out, guns drawn. James lifted Emily into his arms as they approached. "She says her mom is inside," he told them. A female officer reached for the girl, but Emily whimpered, refusing to let go of James. "It's okay, honey," James assured her. "These officers will take care of everything." Finally, she allowed the officer to carry her away, her small arms wrapped around the woman's neck. The lead officer signaled his team. They moved in formation toward the house, calling out orders. "This is the police. Come out with your hands up." For a moment, a sudden crash. A man burst out the back door, sprinting toward the fence. James barely had time to register what was happening before two officers tackled the suspect to the ground. Handcuffs clicked. A struggle. Then it was over. A life saved. Moments later, two officers emerged from the house, guiding a disheveled woman out the front door. Emily's mother. She was shaken, wrists red from being tied up, but alive. When she saw Emily, she broke into sobs, reaching for her daughter. James watched as they collapsed into each other's arms. Relief flooded his chest. The police secured the scene, questioning James briefly before thanking him for his quick response. Before leaving, to him, her tiny arms wrapping around his waist. "Thank you, Mr. James. she whispered. He smiled. Anytime, sweet.